We begin with the latest twist in the case of WikiLeaks whistleblower Julian Assange. We've received word that Ecuador has granted him asylum. Assange was arrested in London back in December of 2010 and has been going through legal battles there ever since. He's been held up at the Ecuadorian embassy in London for nearly 2 months, awaiting President Correa's decision. Today, Ecuadorian President Rafael Correa granted asylum to Assange. The two men have spoken to each other several times over the past few years, including an in-depth interview on Assange's show. He's been fighting extradition to Sweden, where he's facing questioning over alleged sex crimes. Assange has offered several times to be interviewed over the phone or at the Swedish embassy, but officials rejected that offer. Assange has expressed fear that his ultimate fear is to be extradited to Sweden. That will lead him to being sent to the United States, where he believes he will be prosecuted for releasing hundreds of thousands of classified documents on WikiLeaks. Also released the video you see here of a U.S. helicopter firing down on innocent civilians on the ground in Iraq. Now, while this is a huge victory for Assange, the ordeal isn't close to being over. This as the UK threatens to arrest Assange the moment he steps foot outside of the embassy. And the UK has reportedly threatened to raid the embassy to arrest Assange. Now, this has sparked outrage among Assange's supporters. You can see here protesters outside of the Ecuadorian embassy in London, leading to some arrests. RT spoke exclusively today to Assange's mother, Christine. Here's what she had to say.
As you've seen in the last 24 hours, that the British government, bidding of the US, was prepared to go to extreme measures and breach international law. I wasn't sure how it would go, but I knew that that we were on a firm footing in terms of the correct facts, which would prove that Julian was being persecuted. And I was also very heartened by the fact that the Ecuadorian government was willing to look in depth and leave no stone unturned to find out the truth. And they've done that.
Now, for the very latest on this case, RT correspondent Laura Smith is on the ground in London.
The reaction from Assange's supporters here was unequivocal when his asylum was finally granted by Ecuador. There were cheers, there were chants, there was a big contingent from the Ecuadorian community actually saying hands off Ecuador. They're still behind me, still chanting, but not everyone was as pleased. In a statement from the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, they said that they were disappointed, and the Foreign Secretary, William Hague, later made a statement in which he said that Ecuador knew the full legal context which affected their binding agreement to extradite Assange to Sweden, and that the decision to grant him asylum on behalf of Ecuador was regrettable. He also confirmed and reiterated that they would not be granting Julian Assange safe passage and that there was no legal basis for them to do so. Let's just hear a little bit of what he said in his statement.
It does not change the fundamentals of the case. We will not allow Mr. Assange safe passage out of the United Kingdom, nor is there any legal basis for us to do so.
He also denied that there had ever been any implication that British police would storm the Ecuadorian embassy behind me in order to arrest Julian Assange. That's not what the Ecuadorians understood in a letter that was delivered to Quito. In fact, in response to that letter, which they say was a threat to violate their embassy in London, Ecuador have issued a very strong statement of their own. So the situation here really remains as it was before the asylum request was granted, in that Julian Assange is still in the building behind me. He still doesn't know how he's going to get from here to the airport and from there to Ecuador, because the moment he sets foot outside this building, he is liable to arrest by the British police, and it does look like that would happen. And what is developing here is, in no uncertain terms, an ugly diplomatic spat, with neither the UK or Ecuador looking like they're about to back down.
That was RT correspondent Laura Smith.